Welcome to the Health Data Space Dialogue, the Data Spaces Dialogue in the health community. IDSA, thanks to all the help in setting this up, is the host. And I think a lot of participants for today's session are members of the IDSA association, but our community, or let's say the community of people interested in data spaces, because these are the ones already know that data spaces are the future in many industries, but foremost in the healthcare industry. So the audience today are also people that are not just members from the IDSA. So let's frame it this way: IDSA is here the platform, the host, and what we want to have with today and what we want to have for the future is in very inclusive format, because we all want to know what's going on in health data spaces across Europe, and we want to keep each other informed. And I mean, we want to connect to each other, because we all know that data sharing is nothing that is in the field of competition, because data spaces will just exist and data spaces will be attractive just if we all connect and share our data in a way that we can create value in our industry, and this we all need. So the time couldn't be better. We have a great plan for today, so I don't want to spend a lot more words. I just wanted to make another announcement or point you on something that just happened recently, that the Data Space Support Center, with also all the important players out there that make data spaces happen, just formed and officially announced with support from the European side and European Commission. So I think this is another good external sign to say that data spaces, all initiatives that are there, the time is right just now. So do you see the agenda? So our goal for today is to have a start, to connect each other, and we want to share as much as information as we have, so that others know and can connect in the real world, and people can connect each other, afterwards. So today we will start with something that can not be said often enough, and this is the why. Why are we doing this? We are healthcare. We are not retail, we are not mobility, we are not automotive, we are healthcare. So let's think about what this means, and André will share some thoughts on that with us. And I'm very happy that we can see you, André, because you will be the next one presenting. Afterwards, we will have, so André is the founder of the Institute for Digital Transformation in Healthcare, and he is also a board member of the IDSA. So he will also, share these healthcare thoughts from the perspective of what's possible in sharing data. Then we will have from Christoph, we will get in very interactive way. We just remind ourselves how easy, also for not technology people in the room, it is to understand the concept of data spaces if you really want to. So that's the challenge Christoph is going to take today, because you don't have enough time and we all need to understand. And then I'm very happy that we have Maro from Roche with us today. Maro and a few other people that are also today in the call lead an initiative within the BDI, Bund Deutscher Industrie, where the industry is kind of, getting together, and something is coming up, and Maro will give us an actual view where we stand, because the good thing about it is it's collaborative and it's inclusive, and it just makes fun if all of you in this call get involved later. And then we have another guest, and this is David Schönwerth from Bitkom. He has the task to talk with us here in this call about the European Health Data Space, because the European Health Data Space is an initiative that has been out there, and all of you who are talking about or leading own initiatives among data spaces cannot afford to not know or not somehow deal with the European health data space. So with David, we will talk about what it means for us all and how we can also connect to this. And afterwards, we have a panel discussion, and I'm very happy that we have Delia Strunz from Johnson & Johnson here with us, and Christian Müller from Bayer. They both also part of the group within the BDI and pushing this topic forward within their own companies and also within the industry. And they have great insights, and happy to share them with you too. And then we will also put this into a perspective. What does it all mean? And from our industry perspective that we have here, what does it need actually to make data spaces happen and to successfully scale this up? And then we will just have a little outlook to what's next, to the next data space dialogue, and we will have some question and answers and closing words. So, André, the stage is yours. Tell us why data sovereignty is essential to healthcare and what this has to do with data spaces.
Okay, very good. Now I am unmuted. Thank you very much, Sarah, for having me here. Well, as you said, as a medical doctor with a background in engineering, by the way, I'm very pleased to contribute to our dialogue today on the topics of the health data spaces. And in medicine, the human being is always in the center of every effort. Every technological advance that has been made in the past and today must be evaluated ethically for its practical significance for humans. And in this respect, when we think about the value of digitization and data in the health industry, examples are needed to show the importance of data for the healthcare sector. And now recent history has challenged humanity with a global pandemic. Probably no other event in the recent decades has brought the issue of health into the focus as much as the virus known as COVID-19 virus has. And just to remind you, the genetic sequence of the COVID-19 virus was first published in January 2020. And it kicked off an international sprint to develop a vaccine and represented an unprecedented between the pharmaceutical industry and the governments all around the world. And it worked. Months later, even the US government approved emergency authorization for multiple vaccines. And we all need this experience, and we all had this kind of experience from I was there when moment, you know? And in this context, I remember a conversation that I had with Dave Johnson, who is the Chief Data and Artificial Officer of Moderna. Moderna, as you may know, is a biotech company that was founded 2010 in Cambridge, USA. And it was founded on the promise of mRNA technology. So what is mRNA? Just brief. mRNA is essentially an information module. It is encoded, it's encoded a sequence of amino acids in a single strand and acts as a messenger molecule that corresponds to the genetic sequence of the gene and is essentially to processing and synthesizing proteins. And that protein then can perform a variety of functions in our body, for example, to battle the immunological fight against the virus. So I don't want to go into any more biochemical details, but it is important to know that this approach is fundamentally different from the typical pharmaceutical approach. It is more like a data-driven approach. And this is why I'm mentioning this case. And the researchers know they actually know what they want, and they try to design the right information molecule, the right protein. Then will have, oh, excuse me, my phone. The right protein then will have that effect in the body. And if you know anything about pharmaceutical development, it tends to be a serial process. In a nutshell, after you start your initial idea and experimenting in the laboratories, you go through several different phases of clinical trials. And to cut the story, to the long story short, that whole process from end to end can be immensely expensive, costs billions of dollars, and can take up to a decade to do that. And in many cases, it actually fails. So biotech companies now want to reduce this timeline, and how can they efficiently target more diseases? And that's how Dave ended Moderna. He's not a physician, and he's not a biochemist. His background is in software engineering and data science. He entered the company when it was very young, and they were building that early preclinical engine of a company. And besides the robotic processing of the mRNA and things evolved, that's where AI started to show up. And they started to integrate data models and algorithms into the development process, and were therefore able to automating analysis and much faster predicting outcomes and improving the quality of the data. So when COVID showed up, it was a really powerful moment for that company like Moderna or BioNTech in Germany to apply all the research done before into this scenario. From the day the Chinese authorities published that genome, a sequence of the virus, it took Moderna, for example, only 42 days to building up a clinical grade, a human safe manufacturing batch, and shipping it off to the clinic, which was totally unknown before. A lot of people actually, therefore, were very surprised how fast it moved. And as you remember, fake news showed up because of that. But the biomed industry spent more than 10 years to getting to this point. You have to always to recall that. And it didn't stop there. The company also used data science and AI to really inform the best way and get the best outcome of the clinical studies they made. And so the next big challenge was to perform these large phase 3 trials with more than 30,000 subjects in the studies. And building real-time analytics into the studies wouldn't have been possible without processing all those health-related data. Monitoring the patients in that study wouldn't have been possible without the algorithmic intelligence. And finally, about a year after the journey on COVID-19 had begun, Moderna got that emergency use authorization for the vaccine, which was a very impressive act for a thing that usually takes many years. BioNTech did the same here in Germany. And in that conversation, Dave said that he never thought that one day he will have to use the medicine that he helped building with data. And so it was a very emotional moment to have that vaccine injected into his arm. And we all witnessed the lucky and relieving moment and saw the benefits for millions of people in the world. And that amazing experience is a result of the convergence of data and biosciences. It shows a paradigm shift into a world of healthcare in which any future development and clinical benefit for patients cannot be achieved without an interdisciplinary approach. And data is the core of this innovation. We must be able to share and process data in a self-determined and sovereign way. We have to have safe data spaces to be able to capture the value of the health-related data. And may it be sequenced out of the genome or gathered out of our environment. Only by using this data, we will salvage the treasure of health, well-being, and longevity. That was my why speech, and I hope it gives you ideas for the further discussion, Sarah.
Thank you so much, André. And I think thanks for really going with us through a concrete example that had to do with all of us. And I think we can never ever underestimate in our field, in our industry, healthcare, the human is in the center, and this just changes everything. And we can never forget that. And also, yeah, that's I think we are all aware of this here, but we have to understand that the solution for that is going to be interdisciplinary. We cannot just have medical doctors not having an idea on how data can create value. So we have to take all of them with us on the journey. So I see Christoph already. Thanks, André, so much. I see Christoph. So hand over to you, and please let us know how DataSpace is a solution for data sharing to unlock the potential of value that we have in our industry.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. And actually, so the topic of interdisciplinarity is maybe a good starting point for what I'm about to talk about. First of all, let me check my setup here. Depending on the tool, it's always a bit tricky, so I can see you see the wrong screen. One sec here. Now you should be good to see the slides. So I would like to talk not so much about the why, even though I'm also used to have this kind of discussion. I think, André, thank you also. You perfectly well underlined the reason why. I would like to talk a bit more about the how and what is it actually that we're looking at. And the reason why, motivated and brought to a point, is like we all need data sovereignty, regardless of the domain in which we are doing what we are doing. Data sovereignty is key. Otherwise, we will never achieve a data economy that is really flourishing. This belief is, by the way, something that not only here the people from the health share, but also more than 130 members of IDSA do. But let's bring it to the point where we can start talking about what is it actually that we are looking at. And partly this is also merged story-wise with the journey that IDSA did. I don't know if any of you remembers the times at the beginning. We were not called International Data Spaces Association, but Industrial Data Spaces Association. So basically what we're looking here at from a health perspective is something that where the seed was planted in the industrial sector. Nevertheless, the concept is valid for all kinds of domains. And let me, not slide-wise, Sarah already announced it. Let me try to make it a bit more interactive to give you a walkthrough through what we are actually looking at. So when we talk about data spaces, most companies that think about this approach perceive it from the perspective of someone who either wants to share data that they own or consume data. Yeah? In context of healthcare, this could be a patient. Nevertheless, at the end, we have to have data spaces at hand to remain sovereign over our data from the perspective as patient, as well as from the perspective of companies. How this is achieved is by joining a data space via what we call a connector. Yeah? It's our gateway to a data space, enabling us as a patient, but also as a company, here a factory as representation of a company, to be part of a data space. In this connector, we can define the rules, the policies that have to apply in case I want to share my patient data, my personal heartbeat rate with the company, I can define the policies right in the connector that I'm owning. I can say which company is able to read, which company is able to write, maybe even my data, who is allowed to give it to third parties, and who has to delete the data after 3 days when the purpose of whatever the context of this scenario then is, why I share my data, is fulfilled. This is something I have under my control. And also, of course, from the perspective of companies and also from a business-to-business perspective, this is very much required. Yeah? This is how data sovereignty is really brought to the top level. There are, nevertheless, there are more components in such a data space than only those who exchange data. There are more than those who own connectors in order to define those rules. We need a certain infrastructure. It is comparable to what we have also in the internet. Yeah, we as users of the internet, we are used to interact with it via our computers, with our smartphones, but we, or only few people, have an understanding about the back end that is behind it. The backbone that enables us to watch cat videos and also read scientific studies at the same time. More or less the same is also true here for data spaces. So let's have a quick look at what this infrastructure from a functional and role perspective looks like. One very important aspect, and maybe also here, let's write the most important what is it? So the most important asset of a data space, besides data sovereignty, which is trust, into the middle. So we remind ourselves that this is very important here, to trust each other in order to feel comfortable exchanging data. One aspect to establish that, besides the sovereign aspect and the rule and policy enforcement that I told you about, is the topic of identity. Each participant, regardless if he or she is a patient or a company, needs a digital identity to be identifiable, so that I can be really sure that you are you if I agree to the fact to share data with you. So we have identity provider as a very important aspect. Another role that is foreseen here is the so-called metadata broker. Now, if you think about use cases and why you want to share data or consume data from the perspective of other participants here, you might be lucky and know the people or the companies that have the data that you want. It's just like having a phone book on your phone. I know the phone number of the people that I'm in frequent contact with, but what about if I have to call someone that I do not know? If I have to consume data of a participant of this ecosystem that I'm not aware of, maybe. So the metadata broker really is the component here that is a log of data endpoints, where the fact that someone owns data is registered, and therefore the data endpoints are listed, together with things like the policies that I have to agree on in case I want to consume the data, also things like prices or other meta information about the data sets themselves. The data itself remains with the one who owns it. It's only the component that helps you to discover data endpoints. Same story, but a bit shorter here maybe, is the story of the App Store, because you might want to be able to also process the data within your connector environment, the runtime environment, which we call connector. And therefore, an App Store, you can understand it as the App Store that you also have on your mobile phone, where you can search for tons of apps with different purposes that you can download and deploy to your environment and make use of it. Same is true here for the App Store. Another component that is important, but a bit more difficult to understand if you go deeper, is the vocabulary provider, because here is where the story of semantic data exchange starts. At the end, especially when we talk about persons sharing data, it still gives you the feeling that we are talking about people sitting behind the screen, making a real-time decision on, do I share, don't I share, etc. But at the end, we are also here in this environment talking about machine-to-machine communication. But in order to enable machines to communicate, you really need ontologies, you need vocabularies And this is something that IDSA does not define for all the domains. The ontologies that we define only go onto a level where we enable this data space that you see here, but we do not define how you can label blood pressure data or in general data for surgery. This is something that every domain has to decide on their own, where the vocabulary providers just the place in this data ecosystem, in this data space, where you can make prominent which are the ontologies that you want to use. Another aspect that also pays mainly into the trust value here is the so-called clearinghouse, but also you can refer to it as a transaction log. So if I decide to share my data with the company, the fact that this data exchange has happened without making prominent which exact data were exchanged, the fact that this data exchange happened is logged in the clearinghouse. So a third independent party keeps a log over whom exchanged data with whom. This is also underlining the trust value here. And with this, we basically have all the ingredients that you probably would need in order to have a trustworthy ecosystem that allows you to share the data. So you are able to enforce the policies, you're able to know with whom you exchange data, and so on and so forth. And this is basically the entire story of how a data space is working. And I don't know how I'm doing time-wise, Sarah. We could talk about this for hours, but I think
I always pop up. My video pops up when like you should finish.
I finished. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much, Christoph. I think I'm speaking for all the participants here. We could, spend a lot more time on that and extra sessions. And everyone who's interested, there are adoption sessions of IDSA. You can join and you can get educated. That's no problem. But what I think is so great about what you just gave us in less than 10 minutes is, okay, technology is not the problem. Yeah, this is what I, as a not technologist, understand. And I'm so happy because I've been watching this data space field for quite some years now. And I'm so happy that we can actually say that technology is not the problem. And there's something that you wrote in the middle, and that came also, within André's story, we already had this word, and this is trust. So in the end, we can make technology work for us, but we as humans and as stakeholders of different companies, we have to trust each other, we have to trust in the system, and we just have to make it happen. I think, hello, I'm seeing David, thanks for joining. But now I think this is the trust is somehow the perfect keyword for Maro. Maro, we don't see you, but now you are, it's your turn. And Maro will actually give us an overview what trust among competitors and industry players that not necessarily need to, look into the same direction, what trust among those people has established already in the last month. And so, Maro, the stage is yours. Please let us all know the stage is yours.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to present about this initiative, and thank you also for the good introduction, Sarah and Christoph. Obviously, we already know each other. We have been working for a bit more than a year, and the idea started with both of you, so I'm really happy to see how far we have come. I've taken the motto of today's session as well, how to unlock the potential of data while retaining data sovereignty. And I would like to share with you the results of us working with a team of companies, trading associations, startups, which over the course of more than 12 months now have come together in Germany to discuss what is it that we as industry can contribute to finally get the digital transformation going in terms of start sharing data, in terms of creating a joint digital basis for the innovation that we would like to see on top. And I believe that the starting point was the struggle we are all facing understanding that the big challenge of the digital transformation cannot be succeeded by only one player or one company. But we have been acting as such, and I believe what is needed is for us to come together and realize that many of the things that needs to be achieved for the digital transformation to be successful cannot be done individually, need to be solved together to really reach a joint vision of a collaborative health data space. So a marketplace for digital services and innovations in compliance with digital data privacy regulations of all actors that are needed to play together. So healthcare professionals, physicians, our pharmacies, insurance companies, industry, the clinics, and at the center, of course, the patients themselves. What we are seeing right now, we do not have that digital marketplace coming together, but rather we have a fragmented, splitted landscape. But our vision is, how can we achieve this, right? Because we believe that this is what is needed to develop new data-driven digital value chains. And we also believe, and this may be even the most important piece, that acting together in a joint fashion will gain and achieve credibility and gain trust. So I often compare our situation maybe to the aerospace industry situation, air travel, where all airlines and airports of the world have come together and succeeded in digitizing fundamental processes. So not just the boarding, but also many processes we do not see up front, such as the boarding, the weather data sharing, luggage tracking, and the airline industry, the aerospace industry appears at one. And we believe that this is the key reason why there's so much trust. Nobody is asking the questions about, why do they want my data? Where are they storing my data? And the airlines actually actively share with each other data. For example, when there is an airplane crashing, they share the report together. And we like to understand, how can we achieve what they have achieved with a very different environment. It is healthcare, but the spirit remains the same, the togetherness and the collaborative spirit. So why are we not there yet? When we look at the trend of digital transformation, and we think maybe of the past, when this all thing started, initially there were single-sided data sharing initiatives. So maybe one or two companies joined together in a consortia and in a partnership and agreed to share specifically maybe for one product around one health issue, certain data with each other. And this has led to many technologies rising in parallel, to many different standards and approaches. And one early understood that this is not really helpful to the customers who are using those products. So maybe today we're more where we believe it's kind of like a platform-based data sharing. The companies have understood that they need to open up. They need to have, fulfill the different needs of their customers. They need to fulfill certain needs around interoperability. They need to provide certain interfaces, but still we are thinking in terms of, let's build a platform where I can lure in many customers around one topic. And then, this is how we'll drive my monetization. But ultimately, this is our belief. The future can only be about a federated data sharing ecosystem where there's no longer lock-in effects, where the systems can actively share data with each other. There's good interoperability, well-established interfaces. And this is what we are looking towards to. So when we look, for example, at the different potential healthcare value changes in healthcare, let's start with a very simple one, for example, the supply chain. All the industries are facing very similar challenges, not just in scarce resources as we currently are facing, or in global developments around inflation or wars and natural catastrophes. We have similar challenges when it comes to fulfill the whole value chain or supply chain. There's a big potential there to digitize a supply chain in a data space together to overcome these challenges together. For example, as I lay out here in the next slide, when we look at the footprint, CO2 footprint, or when we look at some regulatory requirements are coming towards, when we think about distribution optimization, none of those use cases that I've highlighted here on the right can be fulfilled by one single company on their own. All the players who are needed in healthcare supply chains must come together, and we believe that the data space is a big solution, is the only solution to overcome these challenges. There's no differentiation potential, there's no unique selling potential for a company to try to resolve these things by their own. And not just that, if we don't come together, we're going to increase the number of different solutions in parallel. We're going to increase the mistrust in some of those solutions, and we're not going to be able to achieve a fully connected environment. So this is the vision we are taking with us. And intentionally, we believe that we need to start with the supply chain, because this is something where we may not yet need the approval for patients. We're not yet including patient data. It's just our data. Nobody's holding us back from doing this. But down the road, of course, we would like to achieve data spaces with greater complexity, such as healthcare professionals' interactions, product use and life cycle, R&D, where we may, for example, try to digitize clinical studies and improve the speed and reduce the cost of so. And ultimately, what we're all working towards is to have a really patient journey that is existent in a data space where all the actors and all the members who participate and support a patient throughout their journey can contribute together in such a data space. So we like to differentiate between data space and use cases. And something that to me is very, very important, Christian, Christoph, I think you highlighted more, let's say, the technical perspective, or what a data space is. To me, a data space is a big opportunity to actually collaborate. This is what I believe, for example, in Germany, is one of the biggest missing factor. So historically, we're geared towards trying to solve the things on our own. This is a analogous mentality. But what we actually need to do, we need to talk together. None of us is going to be able to achieve the digitalization of clinical trials, for example, on their own. This can only work together, but we do not have the experience of collaborating on the large scale. We do not have the platform over which we can fulfill the implementation of this collaboration. We do not have the culture. We do not have the forum. So I like to, point you to the dimension of a data space that is somewhere way beyond the technology, and it's just, we will be talking together. So even in the end, if we do not achieve to fulfill all of those use cases, simply the fact that we are talking together will bring us so much further, because as Christian also pointed, collaboration is not prevented by a lack of technology. Technology is there. Collaboration is not prevented, interoperability, it's not prevented by a lack of data models and formats. They are all there. It's just prevented by us not coming together on a high enough level and agreeing to follow a joint higher purpose. So, what is there for us to gain if we continue down this road? We have already mentioned today trust. I'm very, very big on this hypothesis that creating such a collaborative data space where we jointly implement, design, and fulfill the use cases will increase the trust. So because we're then no longer talking about an individual solution from an individual company, and we're no longer talking about 10 different solutions, where I actually am overwhelmed as a user to understand, what are the difference between those 10 different solutions. And I always will have the feeling, if I go with one, maybe I should have gone with the others, because I may not have all the information at hand. And I believe this is what distinguishes us greatly from, for example, the aerospace industry. Access and interoperability, I already talked about this. Now, the only way to overcome issues of interoperability, hard word, is to actually come together and agree. And again, there's no need to have different models. There's no need to have different interfaces, because for what? This is, historic, anachronistical thinking. In the past, people were always trying to force their standards, force their interoperable interfaces so that they gain from it. But we must switch, we must flip this equation to say, what is the system asking us? And the system obviously is asking us for a fully interoperable healthcare network. Data sovereignty, we have touched about this. We're not talking about, the movies that I watched in the aeroplane, but we're talking about healthcare data. So we must put data sovereignty at the center of by design of our solutions, and this is something we believe we can achieve, for example, with the IDSA standard. We talked about innovation, which means let's higher the level on where we are competing against each other, away from who has the technology foundation, who has the right data model, but more towards a higher level of where really the innovation is needed, who can integrate best the solutions and deliver the best outcomes to patients and the healthcare professionals. I like to compare this to building highways when all you ever wanted is just to deliver maybe a good pizza that you have from your grandmother or your grandfather. And so what are we? Are we fundamentally technology companies, or are we actually healthcare innovation companies? And I believe we're the latter. So why don't we come together and agree on a foundation and then compete on where we actually see a greater value to compete? Strategic readiness, we talked about, of course, Corona is still there, but there are new challenges, regulatory challenges coming ahead on a regular basis. How can we best answer these challenges? Unforeseen or foreseen challenges, and we believe, with a digital foundation of a data space, this is the best way to be able to be ready to respond. And maybe on a almost last slide, I would like to say, how does this work with European health data space, which in the name itself already contains a lot of overlap? And how does this work with, I'm about to finish, how does this work with the primary healthcare systems? We believe that this can co-work perfectly together, because personalized healthcare needs so much more than the primary systems and so much more than the European health data space, which is meant to facilitate secondary use. And as we talk, for example, in the supply chain, but also in other clinical studies, we see use cases that go across all of those systems. And this is where we believe we have a great opportunity. So, yeah, with that having said, I'm putting here the slide to be shared afterwards. We have a plan on how to move forward. We are looking towards having the MVP. So which data space do we build up first? Which use cases do we start with? And we are very happy to have IDSA and idigiT support us along this path, and more than happy to invite others to join this. It's happening, so get on board.
Thank you so much, Maro. Thank you so much. Yeah, I have some connection issues. Thank you so much, Maro, for this introduction and giving everybody some insights on what you have been working with all those amazing other players. And as I understood you right, and you can enforce this in the panel discussion later, it's a collaborative approach. It's not at all exclusive. That means when I can't see any participants, but hopefully you can hear me. If you are interested in information on where they stand and how you could collaborate, you can just get in touch and you will get the information and you can onboard. So it's a very it's the good news about it, because a lot of data spaces, things that happening out there are exclusive. So is kind of contrary with the idea that in the end we all need each other. So we have to speed up a little bit, and I think, Maro, you already shared the European health data space on one of your last slides, and I'm very happy that we have David with us today, who's actually from Bitkom. So you see, we as IDSA Health Community, we are talking about BDE, about Bitkom, and we are very inclusive. And the good thing about David is he is also an expert on data spaces and in the data economy. And he will give us an industry perspective on the European health data space, because it's not so sure that the European health data space is always in the best interest of the industry. So I'm very happy, David, on your thoughts and your ideas on that. So stage is yours.
Sarah, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me, and I assume that you can see my presentation right now. If not, please feel free to interrupt me. Okay, thank you for having me so much. I'll try to keep it brief so we have time for the discussion. Also, since I have to leave at 3:30 sharp, the latest. Okay, so my name is David. I'm a policy officer for data economy at Bitkom, sitting in Berlin. I work on data policy files in Berlin and in Brussels. I cover data spaces developments horizontally, so we try to understand the technology, try to understand the economics behind it, the legal dimension, and see how we can move this forward. Sometimes this also includes data architectures, data strategies, more operational things, also within enterprises. It doesn't have to be between enterprises. But of course, this line gets a bit blurry these days. That said, I'm here today to show you this disclaimer first, of course, because I think it's important. But then I think I'm actually here to talk about the European health data space and what it actually means, because it comes up quite often, but it's not always clear what people refer to when they talk about the health data space. Okay, so I tried to put this into, I made these slides today because it's like the latest things I found about it. I try to have two pillars. There's a stricter sense of EHDS and there's a wider sense. I think this is an important distinction because there is a regulatory proposal from the European Commission from 3rd of May this year. So it's like a draft law. It primarily looks at primary use and secondary use of health data. I'll try to elaborate what that exactly means. This is the stricter sense. There is a wider sense, and that includes this whole idea of a kind of data space ecosystem, which I think for the community I talk to here, which is not just EU regulatory policy people, it means much more than just this one draft law. It touches law, of course, implementing regulations on member state level, member state laws, EU laws, lots of things. It also touches infrastructure. It touches infrastructure funding. There's different funding programs. 2 of them I wrote down here in yellow. There's more infrastructure, of course. There's much more. So it's like this whole idea of kind of having one common European health data space, if you want. It goes much further than this one draft law. There are stakeholders included and so on. Before I go to the next slide, I want to quickly just remind you that when we talk about primary use, roughly speaking, we would talk about, for example, me accessing healthcare and kind of handling my data, controlling my data, moving it from one country to another, maybe also. This is where the European Union becomes interesting. But it's mostly like the kind of the first line of me accessing healthcare, of consumer, between consumer and provider of healthcare services, for example. It can also include insurance, these kind of the kind of first line of the ecosystem. But there is a second line, which is secondary use. So this is where we talk about research. This is where we talk about new products, talk about innovation, talk about also maybe predicting, finding new diseases, causes of diseases, these kind of things. So like beyond the primary use of why we have this data and what we needed to kind of run healthcare, there is a second kind of dimension. And it's interesting here that maybe to just give a small note, there's a DG at the European Commission, so DG Santé. They look at healthcare policy, health policy. Interestingly though, health policy is member state competency. This is something that your member state does. It's not something the Commission does. But the Commission becomes involved, especially when we talk about cross-border kind of things. So if I move to France, can I, or if I make vacation there, okay, if I'm on holiday, can I move my healthcare data with me? Can I access healthcare there without much issues? So this is about free movement of people and free movement of goods also, right? Because, for example, healthcare products that generate data between one member state and the next member state, you kind of want this to be somehow compatible. This is where the Commission says, hey, I'm interested in this. And this is also true for research and innovation, because in the end, this then is about the single market, if you want, right? Like this idea of we have one kind of common European market for products and for services, for example. And they also talk about the single market for data. So this is where the Commission comes from a bit. It's like from a kind of more overarching approach. Well, if you're super interested in this, Article 114, this is about the single market, and Article 16, this is about data protection, and this is kind of the legal basis why the Commission finds themselves kind of eligible, competent to act on healthcare and health policy, while usually they would not be competent. That said, the proposal itself, so the draft law from this year, this is something I copied, and I think I deleted some punctuation and these kind of things from the impact assessment that was attached. That is part of the proposal. Like there's a part before the proposal that tells you this. So you can click the link and then have a look. So the proposal does certain things. It's about the rights the rights to data protection for citizens. It's about the secondary use of data. It's about the whole governance mechanism behind secondary use of data. Also, the government's mechanism for primary use of data. And this is all just laws. This is like, how do we distribute rights and obligations when it comes to dealing with health data, personal health data? This doesn't have anything to do with any kind of data space. Like, it's not something, you will not see this implemented because it's like merely laws, right? But then of course, laws and regulations, this is one pillar of what we would kind of consider this big European health data space ecosystem. But frankly, you could say that these laws could totally be in place without trying to create a European health data space that you could at some point maybe log into or use in some way or ship data to. But then we have point 4, and point 4 is about infrastructure. And this is what, again, I think we could discuss 2 hours what a data space exactly is, but this is where it becomes maybe the most kind of applied and the most close to something that you can touch. So this is where we talk about 2 infrastructures in particular, and then I can also say something about kind of how this is going to be funded to kind of give the technology kind of baseline that you would need to then move data back and forth and kind of have these rights on top, right? Like, this is how we can do it, and on top are the rights that tell us who may do what and what not. There's more things depending on what you're interested in, or if you're representing a company when it comes to electronic health record systems and kind of product certification, market access, these kind of things. But I think this is enough for now. So to recap, this is the draft law. This is kind of the draft law in a nutshell. Right. I will go into this with one more slide, which is it's a bit advanced, but I think it's important. Because it mentions these two kind of types of infrastructure, which are part of the proposal of this year. The first is My Health at EU, and the second is Health Data at EU. The idea is that the proposal creates the foundation to build these 2 infrastructures. Actually, they're already there, but to kind of develop them further. And the interesting thing is that using this, I will call it the platform for now, but call it whatever, call it an ecosystem, call it from that there's a front end, so you could say it's a website, but whatever, it doesn't matter right here. So there are these 2 platforms, infrastructures, and they are mandatory in some aspects for member states authorities. So there will be new member states authorities to kind of govern the access to health data for primary use and secondary use, right? So we said that we need different rules, different laws, who can use what kind of data, and the decision for that will be taken in particular by the member states digital health authority and the member states health data access body. So each member state will have these institutions if they don't have them yet. They can also be the same one, but they will have to be established, if not already there, when the EHDS proposal comes into application. So the EHDS proposal creates 2 per member state, creates up to 2 institutions who would then need to kind of work with these 2 infrastructures to make data available cross-border, right? Cross-border. And why do I mention cross-border so much? Because this is, of course, I said where the EU is most interested in, but also just because it's a federated system. And this is something you will know, right? Like what this means in a sense. So there will be a more like a rather decentralized kind of level where the member state is responsible for kind of managing health data. But then on top, there is a federated kind of second layer, which is kind of trying to connect different member states. So there's 2 layers. There's the member state, and then there's a layer on top. And this makes it quite complicated, of course. There's also a board that tries to kind of align everything a bit, but roughly speaking, it's a federated kind of system. You could maybe compare it in some sense if you're a bit brave to maybe how the German kind of healthcare ecosystem works, right? There's a health ministry on top, federal one, but then there's all these states who have their own health policy and who run their hospitals and these kind of things. So there's 2 layers of governance, or then for the case of Germany, maybe even more than that, for example. So this is just for the kind of mechanism, and this is where the infrastructure kind of can be put into perspective with the bigger kind of image, right? Question that is not 100% clear is who is going to provide that data, and is, for example, industry going to provide such data as well? So who is the data holder, right? Because it's also, as I said, about who gives data, who gets data, primary use, secondary use. All right, enough for this. I will just speak just a minute about infrastructure funding. There's mentions of infrastructure in the concrete draft law. There's also more infrastructure. There is already infrastructure. There's going to be more infrastructure when you read the data strategy, when you read what is also like this whole idea of the common European data space, where this is the wider sense. It's not just, as far as I understand, these 2 kind of pieces of infrastructure that we talked about before. Instead, there's much more. And again, also there's the federal, there's the European layer, but then there's also the member state layer. So you will need to, for example, if you look into the first funding program there, you will see that there's grants the Commission or the European Union gives to member states so they can implement infrastructure for primary and secondary use of data, because it is a federated system, right? There's also other Digital Europe program. IDSA people here will know also about the Data Spaces Support Center, right? There it rings a bell. So there's different, more horizontal, more sectoral kind of funding initiatives that we can find already. And because these programs will run for years, I would expect more of these, right? And if you want to find out more about that, what kind of is on the horizon in terms of funding, which I assume includes infrastructure, but to be completely transparent, it's not 100% clear who will exactly build what and how this is going to be funded, if it's going to be funded. So this is moving target. And there's a first idea that we find in the EHDS proposal, where the Commission lines out how they intend to kind of build this, right? How they're going to intend to spend money on these things. And you can see this includes My Health at EU, this includes other things, includes Digital Europe program, and so on. And I think maybe the biggest takeaway at this, in the meantime, you can have a brief look at how Bitkom sees this, the proposal in the stricter sense. I think what I would like to end with is to say, bear in mind that it's a federated approach, and that health policy is something that is done on member state level. Still, we want to have a European health data space. So there might be a lot of kind of initiatives and projects that somehow need to take place, right? We'll of course then have to see, is this done by funding? Is this done differently? How is this done? So far, this is not very clear, but the proposal is out there and still being negotiated. I think Parliament, I think they're just at the beginning. They're not even yet negotiating in the trilogue. So they're still very early in the process, and this could take quite some time. All right. If you have any questions about this or anything else, feel free to drop me a line, of course. And I'm happy to stay here for a discussion also about the data space dimension of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, David. And you can stay there. I think your presentation has been packed with information and gave us a good overview. And the EHDS will stay there and follow us in the upcoming years. So it's good to be really up to date. So from the administrative part, I think now we need all the panelists here. So I wait a few seconds until we have them all active. I see Delia, Christian, perfect. Christoph, Maro is missing. Perfect. So to all the participants out there, thanks for staying with us. It's still, I've been on thousands and hundreds of video conferences since this pandemic. Still, I'm talking to my video Now I'm happy to see 5 other faces. It's still somehow awkward. But imagine this is our panel, and I imagine you all also sit there. I can see that you're very active. I can see that in our GoToMeeting. And now I hope you will become even more active. So what is this panel about? This panel here is about that we have, I had a quick introduction on who is on the panel today, but we had a lot of input until now, and we will just share some views from the industry, from Delia, from Christian, and some more from Maro, how these developments that are happening out there actually might become a success. So I will want to start with Delia. Delia, you are from Johnson & Johnson. You have been on this initiative that Maro introduced from the very beginning on, and you have made your experiences within your own company, but also within the political fields of all these data space movements. So I'm so happy you are here and joining us, sharing your thoughts on that. So the stage is yours, and I just want to know, we want to learn from you. What's your perspective? What's Johnson & Johnson, but your perspective from the industry on how can we make this a success?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. This is a very good question, and maybe I really want to share my personal reflections because, as you said, I've been part of this initiative since the beginning of it, and this is now roughly a year where we are working together to make this a success, as you said. Let me start with an overarching message. We heard a lot of having a special mindset working together on such an initiative. And this is what I really want to say. First of all, it's starting with the right mindset. I would say in a digital transformation world, it's more about collaboration and not just having this model of owning a lot of data in your own company, in your own house, and working with this data. But in the future, it would be not enough data in any case. So therefore, we see the necessity to have a lot of data available, but not in a way that you have to own it in your house. It's more the way of a federated data network, where we can share data, where we can use data, but you not have to own data in your, let me say, house or initiative or wherever. So this is the overarching message. From my personal view, I see 4 points which I want to a little bit outline how you can make such initiative successful. The first is to have really an internal buy-in for such an initiative. You have to have the reason why you are doing this, and therefore you would need a convincing value story, I would say. And with this story, you have to convince your senior management that you have the support of this. And this is, first of all, the basis for all the resources you will need for such an initiative. Not just to have the necessary budget, but also the manpower, the expert from your special functions in the company and so on. Next point would be, from my point of view, the right process in place. To have the right process in place, or let me better say, the organization of the project with a convincing plan. It's really our experience that we have a lot of people in our group, and of course it's so that we have a lot of experts, and they have all different opinions on the goals and on activities and so on. And you have to have some kind of a core group, and really a commitment to this core group to be there and to take actions when they are needed. Next point, and this is the third one, is yeah, of course, you have to have aspects of collaborating and building trust. We heard about from Christoph already, the aspect of trust is one of the biggest points. It's not just the fact of trust between the collaborating companies. It will be the biggest, let me say, success factor for having this data room when you think on future patients or future player in the healthcare system you want to collaborate with. And the fourth point I want to raise is the point of technical aspects. There are some, let me say, standards and the question of the connectivity to other rooms we heard about, for example, European Health Data Space and others. We as a big company need, for example, the internationally accepted standards and the concept of a federated data network, so that we have the opportunity to connect with other data rooms in other parts of the world, etc. But here, starting in Germany, it's these are my four initial points which I want to share, and this is for the first time enough, I would say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Delia. That was very structured, and I think we all listen to you, and we know that everything you said is so important, and we all know what it means for us. So, Christian, maybe Delia started out with a mindset of digital transformation, and that when you think about the digital transformation, collaboration is necessary in order to create real value. And we've been in discussions about what value in the healthcare system means, and I think you have a quite inside view on that. So now the stage is yours. I just want to know from you the same question: what would it make successful? But give you the chance to also answer a little bit to Delia on this point, and then share your thoughts with us what it needs to make it successful.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I think the value has to be on the lowest level of the participants, and as you can imagine, medicine is something which happens locally between my healthcare professional and myself. But the initiative is very large, European-wide, and this is the spectrum where we are working. That means we have to think about how to come from the very deep interaction between healthcare professionals and patients on a level that a value can be provided to each and everybody within the system. And if you think to the current situation of how medicine is done and how this will be in the future, there are huge differences, and the consequences have to be quite different. So one step we will see in the future is that we will have preventive medicine, that we want to try a very long period of well-being of the patient, so that we're preventing diseases, any disabilities, and hopefully death for a dedicated period. The second step is that we will do predictive medicine based on the data we have to identify patients at risk, and this is currently done by the experience of the healthcare professionals, but we can also use other instruments for that. And finally, precision medicine will be going much deeper on the genetic level, on the environmental lifestyle. And the tool case we will have right now is that we have diagnostics, we will have drugs, we have devices, and we have data. And therefore, we have to think about how to bring this in the best way together. And therefore, a federated system where we're interacting these information, these data coming from devices, from the knowledge of a community, will lead to a better medicine on the lowest level to provide patients with the best value they can get out of such a healthcare system. So this would be my answer to where's the value in the system itself, overarching the entire field of medicine, and then coming to the human being who is benefiting out of that.
Christian, thank you so much. The 3 Ps, yeah, from prevention to predictive to precision, and then we're having connecting the 3 Ds, the drugs, the diagnosis, and the devices. Everybody here, and I mean Christoph and David in this panel, and you're not necessarily just from the healthcare industry, but that again focuses on what is so different within our industry, that our industry and digital transformation in the healthcare means that we can we really change how medicine potentially works, and we can really make an impact for all of us, for the patients. And I remember that we have a lot of discussions. Is this just our purpose? Is this just our why we are doing this, and why we need a health data space? And when this is the most important thing, why don't we start with that, you know, in the first use case? Let's just take those use cases that really matter and bring us closer to the new mindset and vision of healthcare, of prevent, precision, and predictive medicine. Maro, that is the buzzword for you, because you have shown a picture where you have all the value chains that we have in our industry, and you said that we are on a journey to what Christian has just described would be so beneficial and so helpful for us. Where do we need to start, Maro, and can we start there?
Yes, so I think I have been working with Delia and Christian in the past, and I always compliment their opinions with something more, you know, optimistic. While I appreciate all the reasons they have mentioned how we believe we need to start, I simply believe we need to start. We can almost stumble into this collaboration and then all of a sudden see what's out there. I very, very much believe that there is no alternative to coming together. And if we lose ourselves too much in details about, you know, the very first step that we need to come and do to come together, this is prolonging the process. So I believe it needs courage, it needs trust in the vision, it needs belief in the vision, it needs some kind of passion. And then some people, they first want to see the results and then they believe, and some people believe first and then they will create the results. And this is what we have learned from other similar data space initiatives, such the mobility data space, Catena-X, manufacturing, I think is also starting now in Germany. You need some crazy folks at the beginning who are, you know, with passion, they truly believe and convinced that this will work. And this complements very well everything that Christian and Delia said, because we cannot prove that this will work. We must believe that this will work, but we can learn from others. And what others teaches us is it's almost not important with which use case you start. It's more important that you actually start with a use case, because as I keep pointing out, I believe the biggest gain we have to expect from such a collaborative health data space is all of a sudden we're going to be talking together on, you know, agreeing maybe on how do we want to authorize users on our digital products, agreeing on how do we want to digitally manage consent, agreeing on, you know, building blocks of the future vision. And if we don't even implement them together, but if we specify them together and if we discuss together, this already, I believe, will have a big impact on getting us further. So it's the will, the passion, and the belief that collaboration is the key to success. And then, of course, you know, my company will also not just support this based on my wishful thinking. Yes, we must bring the right use case at the beginning. And this is why I think we are lowering a little bit the expectation. The holy grail is, of course, to participate together in the patient journey, right? Because the patient journey ultimately is a lifelong experience for patients. It has so many involved parties. This is what we are building towards too. But it would be unprofessional to believe that this is where we can start. So let's start with something realistic where we can easily make the business case, where, you know, there's an immediate return of invest in the sense of, you know, we're not hoping that this will work. And I believe, as I mentioned, around supply chain and healthcare professional interactions, there's a lot to gain there. An example for a healthcare professional interaction is almost all of the companies involved on a regular basis, they organize events where we invite healthcare professionals. We have an FSA codex on how to create contracts that are compliant with the rules we have given ourselves. And each of those companies has their own team who deals with the contracting and the compliance of this. This is redundant. I'm extremely sure, without wishing to insult anybody, nobody's compliance team is going to be better or worse than ours. So, but we are approaching healthcare professionals with 10 different ways on how to sign contracts, 10 different ways, data privacy agreement, 10 different ways on how to enroll them in our events. So why don't we do it together? And I think such a use case is a pre-step for a realistic long-term vision. And it's immediately seeable or provable that we're going to benefit from this. So passion, will, trust, and a little bit of craziness, and then the right first use case.
Maro,
we like to call these crazy people pioneers, actually, which gives them a bit of a positive flavor, and I think exactly this is what it requires. Sorry, Sarah. Yeah, if I may, one comment.
Yeah. I think Maro's words are like they summed up what Delia said, what Christian said about the reason why we should do this, and they come around like closing words. But we have a few minutes left, so Maro, thanks for this passion statement. But I will hand over actually to you, Christoph, because there's something we have now touched upon use cases, right? We have touched about come across value creation and what are actually the use cases that, for somehow convince that we actually need a data space. Yeah? A very, very simple question. Are these use cases that can just be realized because of a data space? So you have been, you are head of adoption within IDSA, and you have seen this in so many other industries. So from your perspective, when now people in this initiative here, like those in the panel, but also our participants in the call, finding the right use cases, the hen and the egg, what's first, the data space or the use case? So what can you give us as an insight to help us to actually identify the right use cases?
Yeah, perfect question. That also would have been my comment to what Maro and the others before said, because I actually believe that in the health sector, there is one secret ingredient which other domains do not have that obviously. It's much harder to find it. And this is the relation with the patient. So the trust that I try to motivate in such a data space, that is not only a trust that is established by a decade-long relationship business to business because I know my suppliers, is something that immediately gets clear and inevitable for the relationship with patients, because a patient might not know the system with whom he or she exchanges data. So a technical established trust in this relation from a patient to a solution in a data space is for everyone, I think, clear at the very first second where you look at this. This is something that other domains do not have. If you start defining use cases in, let's say, manufacturing, and I already put this example to the table, it's like, okay, let's think about the use case. From the automotive industry, I am doing business with my first tiers. I know them very well. So great, let's set up a use case where we ping data from A to B with these participants. And all of a sudden, it's not that clear why trust is something that you would have to underline technically, because you are already trusting this company. You have thousands of pages of contracts with these companies. And there it's much harder to motivate why trust from the technical perspective is so important. So here with the patient story, I think there's no doubt about it that on the long run, on the mid run for health, when you want to do business with patients, when patients should share more information about themselves, this trust by design is something that you really have to have built. At the same time, this is also the most challenging thing. So is this the perfect first use case? I would say no, because there are millions and millions of patients out there. It's unclear how to set up the solutions from the first day here. So I think a mix of both, having this patient needs trust by design with let's define a use case that is more handleable in a first step. I think that's the sweet spot of things here really, and an advantage that not all the domains have currently.
And you mentioned the patient as the individual user, but it gets even more complex. I look in Christian's direction. He just said that we have the HCPs, and you know, those triangle within our industry that, you know, you have the HCPs and they have the direct contact with the patient. And it's in many cases in not the industry having this direct relations. And we're hoping that data spaces will somehow change that in the long run, because it's really needed. But also there we have to go step by step and see where value can be created. Christian, do you wanted to add something? You just
Yeah, not only the healthcare professionals and the patients, you have insurances in the system, you have the ministry in the system, you have pharmacies, and many players. I just remind to this very complex picture of the German healthcare system, and there are a lot of players involved there. And especially if you think on that and the overarching idea from the European health data space, on one hand having people in a very good treatment, on the other side that you have access to the data which come out of the routine treatment. It's not only the healthcare professional itself where data will be produced and then can be shared, but there are other players in the background as well. And as Maro showed us from the several steps we may go in the system, in the health data space, there are a lot of use cases which can be tackled. And that's why I think we have to think about what are the low-hanging fruits and what are the really valuable fruits where we make differences with these activities.
Thank you so much. David, you have, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes,
yeah?
Now we can.
Okay, David, I was not sure if you could hear me. David, from your perspective, you're not sharing just your personal view on that, but you in your role from Bitkom, and you working in the field of data space and data economy for a long time. Do you think this European health data space development, as complex as it might be, gives initiatives like the one we are talking here and other initiatives where health data spaces are on their way or industry players are on their way to do something? Do you think it gives it a push from like your perspective of seeing also other industries?
Thank you. Interesting question. Compared to other questions, I think this is one of the first ones where we see this kind of sectoral legislation on top of horizontal legislation, which is not surprising given the sectoral legislation we have in healthcare generally, which also makes it maybe among other sectors one of the most complicated ones. It will take a long time to do this. It will be quite complicated, just giving the complexity of the federated system, who holds their hands over what kind of data, state-wise, national-wise, and then European-wise. I sketched this a bit earlier. I think it couldn't be more needed anywhere than here. I think it's one of the most complicated sectors to do it when I compare it to the other sectors I talked to. But it's you put yourself up to an amazing challenge here, because I think it's one of the most meaningful ones, also for citizens and so on. I think I don't have to explain why this is. I think we all agree this is the right way forward. Surprisingly, and we're happy about this, the EHDS proposal tries to make it easier to create a data economy and not make it harder. So we're happy about its existence. What we should say though is that like the closer we move to ecosystems and the closer we move to also technology, architectures, frameworks, kind of ways how to do it and how to do it, then I think what we really need to take care of, and I think Maro is doing a good job doing that, is to see how do we keep this as open a space as possible. Let's try not to settle on one kind of piece of technology or one kind of standard if we don't have to. So I think this is kind of the beauty. This is what we will need to kind of make this as inclusive and kind of popular as it should be. So because there's always these ideas in the market to kind of, as someone said this earlier, right? Like we want our own standard, we want this format to be the best one. I think this is where we want to be super careful to make sure this actually becomes this vibing ecosystem we expect it to be. And I'm looking forward to this.
Perfect. So thank you so much. I think we are running out of time here, it was just the time was moving so quickly from my perspective. I would want to thank all the panelists so much. I think in this short time, you gave us a good impression on why we should definitely do this, on what kind of overarching goals, like the shift in medicine from prevention, prediction, precision, we can achieve with the data space, that we all need a trust in building it, and that, like Maro said, we just need to get started. I just want to pin, we are not meeting here just one time. We will meet soon again. We will all share the information where you can dial in the next time. And this is also in call for everybody listening to us. Just if you want to share ideas on projects that you are working on that we should know of, please let us know. And then we will set up the agenda accordingly, because this is the goal. We want to be here, the host for connecting each other. We will also provide some information on this session afterwards, so that you can actually have the possibility to connect. I mean, you met here some people, you can do this on your own way, but you can also centrally talk to us, and we will happy to make connections. So that this was just the start, yeah, to one more step on the road to making data spaces happen. That's it.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Sarah.
We have next time we will definitely present the Health-X. I've seen people participants from the Health-X consortium. We will definitely have this on the agenda already. We will probably have somebody from TEHDAS coming to us, and we will probably get an update on the BDE initiative, because we were not so regularly that in there things move quickly. So for you should stay tuned, and if you're out there and having something, let us know so we can include it in the agenda.
Sarah, maybe just to let you know, in the background there were tons of questions coming into
Yes.
our FAQ. We will follow up with you guys also,
yes.
or stay tuned for the next session.
Yes,
Andreas, who is about to share the next events that we also host. There's a Q&A session happening on November 3rd, where you also can dial in to be in a more interactive way with a small group of people going into details on questions from any domains. So stay tuned here.
Perfect. Christoph, we have all this in the backlog, and I have zoomed quickly over the questions, but the questions did not, they were additional. So we will just make sure that we grasp these ideas also for the upcoming sessions. And some of them were very concrete. How can we realize this and that? And we will take care that we have answers to that from the IDSA side, or next time we'll probably have a session where we address these open questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Bye-bye.